All right, so it's recording. In your notebook on that first clean page, if you could write up at the top, Advanced Ceramics Day 2. You're not gonna have to write everything. I'll let you know when there's things I want you to write down here. Okay. Slide. All right, can everybody see the PowerPoint right now? It says welcome to, okay, great, good. Okay, so first, just a little recap of what happened yesterday. We talked about symbolism. I talked about how I use symbolism in my own work to kind of hide a message that's really like mainly for me, like it's therapeutic for me to include these little animals that represent different things. So I asked you to start coming up with some personal symbolism and to create an object that represented different phases of your life. So you used porcelain and you made an object that represented your childhood. You used stoneware and you made an object that represented your current life. And then you used raku to make something that represented your future life, goals or aspirations, whatever, however you wanted to apply that. So, so you know a little bit about symbolism now and representation, and the hope. Well, first of all, the concrete fact is that those objects that you've made will be slaked down and melted down to make 3 kinds of slip on Monday. My guess is today they're not dry enough. They wouldn't slake well if they're not bone dry. So if people at home, just keep those little objects handy, let them dry out. People who are here, keep them in your locker. If they break, in shuffling things around in your locker, it's okay. They're gonna be melted down eventually anyway. And as long as you turned in your photo yesterday, you're fine. That's kind of what I was mainly looking for. It's just that you did it. 3 kinds of clay, 3 objects, 3 symbols. The due date for or the due time for that project, yesterday I put it as midnight. I think that's kind of silly to have the due date be at midnight at this point. For those of you here, and really even for those of you at home, I think 3 o'clock is a reasonable due date time. The people who are here, you're turning stuff in by the time you leave class. So really, you don't need to wait until midnight. And people who are at home, you have this time in the morning during first hour, and then you have the whole afternoon as well to be able to finish whatever we accomplish in class today. And so just warning you that from now on, starting today, I haven't made today's assignment yet, but I will. And when I do assignments from now on, the due date is going to be 3 p.m., just so you're aware. So kind of that's a switch. For those of you who have had me all this year, I've always had the due date be like 10 p.m. or midnight. I think that now that the majority of us are here, we don't need to have it be midnight anymore. So 3 p.m. is the new due time every day. All right, last little bit from yesterday, the symbols that you came up with, those could be something that you end up using in future projects. So your work is communicating something about you and your life in a secretive manner that nobody can really interpret but you, unless you choose to share it. So that's another reason why we did the symbols yesterday, to start building a personal vocabulary of things you could use in your art to communicate about yourself. Because really all art is about ourselves, like whether it's just a blob on a canvas or whether it's a representation of a human. Like when a human creates a work of art, it's about themselves in some way or the other, and whether it's overt or covert. So it's good to start thinking about that. Okay, now what's happening today? Today you're gonna have some notes. I have to talk to you a little bit about the different kinds of techniques we're gonna be using on this new project. And I'm gonna talk a little bit more about porcelain. And so you're gonna start your porcelain project today. You're gonna be working with clay. People at home, you're gonna be working with that little bag of clay that says porcelain on it. People who are here, I have a stash of porcelain. You're gonna get your own bag of porcelain, and that's what you're gonna work with today. So we're gonna start that project, and remember, that's the project where we're gonna fire it outdoors and dropping the horsehair on it to make those squiggly black lines. So that's the project we're starting today. Monday, when you are all back here again, we are going to make the slip from your 3 objects. And then we're going to continue on to the next step of the sphere. And the goal, every week, the goal is to have a project finished by Thursday. So because like nobody's here on Friday. So Fridays will be used for other things, Flex Fridays, but projects will be due every Thursday. So we're aiming to have this porcelain sphere done next Thursday. Okay, so this is vocabulary you should already know. Please jot this down in your notes. Some of you, it's been a long time since you've had Ceramics B. So I just want to make sure that you remember the key things that you need to remember from Ceramics B. People at home, you're writing too. So the first term is stoneware clay. Stoneware is the majority of what you're going to be using in this class. It's a high fire clay body. I cut off a word. The second bullet point, it says contains tiny rocks called, actually I should ask, does anybody remember what those tiny rocks are called? Starts with a G. Grog, yeah, G-R-O-G, grog. And that's why it's called stoneware, is because of those tiny little rocks in the clay. Stoneware bisque fires to cone 06. All clay bisque fires to cone 06, every kind of clay. And that's equal to 1800 degrees Fahrenheit. Stoneware glaze fires to a hotter temperature. It glaze fires to cone 6. And cone 6 is approximately equal to 2100 degrees. So I just did a glaze firing last night, and that kiln room is very hot right now. And so 2100 degrees is really pretty hot. And stoneware can go to a higher temperature, but that's what we glaze fire to, is cone 6, which is 2100 degrees. And if you remember from Ceramics A, the reason that we use cone as a way to measure heat is because of little clay cones such as this that artists still use today to measure how hot their kiln is. So these little cones melt as the kiln reaches higher and higher temperatures. That's why we measure heat in cones, because literally artists use clay cones. Term number 2 that you should remember from Ceramics A and B is slake. And actually, if you had Ceramics A or B here in person, like not this year, you might not know this word. It's only when kids have had to make their own slip that they've learned this word slake. So it might be new to you. So slake means using water to break down bone dry clay into platelets. So on Monday, you're going to be taking your little bone dry objects, your symbols, putting them in a little cup of warm water, and right before your very eyes, the little clay platelets are going to start being ripped apart by the water, and you're going to see them trickling down into the bottom of your little container, slaking down to become slip. So it's kind of a remarkable and very satisfying thing to watch, is that clay slaking right before your very eyes. Term number 3 is wedge. This is clearly something you should know from ceramics class. We wedge clay always for 3 reasons. We are mixing the clay to make it a better consistency. We're removing air pockets, so it's less likely to blow up in the kiln. And if it's really sticky and wet, like for example, the stoneware yesterday was really sticky and wet, it removes water. The more you wedge, the more it dries the clay out. Kind of conversely, I was preparing the porcelain this morning, and porcelain has this really crazy quality. It's thixotrophic. Thixotrophic means it's both solid and liquid simultaneously. And so when I pulled the porcelain out of the bag, it felt really, really like too firm, too dry. But the minute I started to wedge it, it immediately softened up. So it kind of contains those qualities of being like solid and liquid simultaneously. So wedging it actually softened the porcelain, which is kind of a funny contrast to what would normally be the case. So, so wedging, you have to remember, does those 3 things: mixes, removes air, dries it out. And then the final term that I want you to make sure that you remember from A and B are the 5 stages of clay. The plastic stage is the first stage, where it's really soft and pliable, but not very strong. The leather hard stage is the magic stage, and we try and lock the clay in that magic stage for as long as possible, because you can do anything to the clay and it's much, much stronger when it's leather hard. The bone dry stage is when it's totally dry, very fragile, ready to be fired. The bisqueware stage is when it's been fired the first time and has come out of the kiln and is now permanent. And the glazeware stage is where we've glazed it, it's been fired the second time, and now it's food safe. So just a reminder about the names of those stages, because especially plastic, leather hard, and bone dry, you're going to have to be really adept at controlling that. Controlling, if it's plastic, getting it to the leather hard stage and keeping it there. keeping it out of the bone dry stage until you're 100% done. Those are important things to be able to manage. So any questions on those old terms that you should already know? That all kind of ring a bell, right? More or less. It's good to review those things because for some of you, it's been a while since you've been here. Okay, now this is vocab you don't know yet. So draw a line under the vocab that you just wrote down, the stuff that was review. Now we're getting to the stuff that is brand new. So the first new term is porcelain clay. It's the clay you're using for this first project. I explained a little bit about it yesterday, but today I want to go into greater depth. Porcelain clay is a bright white clay body. That's what we call types of clay, is clay bodies, that can fire as high as cone 12. That's about as high as any artist would ever fire their kiln. And that's equal to approximately 2,345 degrees. My kilns do not fire that high, so we can't take it up to that temperature. It's a clay body that, despite its delicate look, it can withstand a lot of heat. Porcelain clay is made up of very tiny platelets that result in a smooth touch. When you run it through your fingers yesterday, you probably felt like it was very smooth and buttery. And because it has small platelets, it has a very strong vitrification. Vitrification means melting together. So those little platelets fuse together or vitrify very tightly when they're fired, making it, again, despite its delicacy look, the look of its delicacy, it's incredibly strong. Porcelain clay is originally from China. Like actual real porcelain comes from China. And that's why if your grandparents have a china cabinet and they have little teacups made from porcelain clay, it's called the fine china. That's your fine china. And so ceramics made from porcelain are oftentimes called china or chinaware because the clay originally came from China. Now it comes from all over, and it's produced synthetically. The kind of porcelain that we have was produced synthetically. And so it's not as fine as the original porcelain that came from China, but it has the same beautiful white coloring. It has the same strength. But the original porcelain that came from China was worth more than gold back in the day. Like people, like alchemists, would spend their entire life trying to figure out how to reproduce porcelain because it was so sought after and expensive. This is kind of medieval era times. So it's always kind of been revered as this very special type of clay. And you get to use it for your first project. Yay. All right, term number 2 is press mold. This first project is all about learning how to use a press mold. So a press mold is an object, and for this unit, we're going to be using a bowl as your press mold. And you're going to be taking clay and pressing the clay into the bowl to help shape it. It's kind of similar to what you did in Ceramics A when you laid a slab over a plaster mold, except in that unit, you laid the clay on top of something. For a press mold, you're pushing it into something, pushing it into a concave void. So you're going to be, people at home, you have a plastic bowl that looks maybe, yours will probably be white, but it's something like this. And you're going to be using that to press your clay into to create the components of your porcelain sphere. Term number 3 is closed form. A closed form is a vessel that is primarily enclosed, which means it doesn't have a really big opening at the top. It should have a strong shoulder. Remember, parts of a pot are named after parts of the human body. And so the part of the pot that curves in toward the neck is called the shoulder. So a closed form has a strong shoulder. And it should have a small mouth. So it needs some kind of opening at the top, otherwise it would blow up. But in a closed form, that opening is very small. It's not a major component of the piece. So I'll be showing you pictures of closed forms in a bit so you get a better visual of what I'm talking about here. But the object you're going to make is going to be a closed form. So it's most likely going to be some type of vase or jug, or it could even be kind of a planter. And so I'll show you examples of that when we get to it. Your final new term is horsehair firing. This is the special outdoor firing that you're going to get to do in mid-April. Even you people at home, you're going to be invited to come if you feel comfortable and be part of that horsehair firing. It is a low fire process where bisqueware pots are left unglazed. So there is no glaze on horsehair fired pots. They're fired outside and removed when hot. And when you have those pots, those hot pots, sitting out there in the grass or on the metal barrels that we have out there, while they're still really hot, too hot to touch, we're going to drop horsehair that'll sizzle and make little squiggly lines. You can drop feathers onto it, and the feathers will make black imprinted images on the clay. You can throw sugar at it, and sugar will make black speckles on the clay. If you want the inside of your pot to be black, you can crumple up a Kleenex and throw that Kleenex inside it, and the Kleenex will burn immediately, Adrian, and it'll make the inside of your pot black. I'm going to show you I can't pass it around, unfortunately, but I can at least show you what it looks like. I know I showed you pictures yesterday, but this is a horsehair fired pot. This is one that we did a few years ago. And you can see the squiggly lines from the horsehair. People at home, squiggly lines. There's a feather where a feather was dropped on the pot while it was still really hot. And then like there's where some sugar was thrown on it. There's kind of black speckles on the surface of the clay. And this is unglazed. We're going to do something into the clay to make it shiny without adding glaze to the surface. So, and this is a good example of a closed form too. It has a strong shoulder that comes in a lot and a small mouth, small opening on the top. So those are your 4 new terms, new vocabulary. Adrian, you're joining the Google Meet now? Okay, so once you're on there, maybe just take a screenshot of this page so you can get the notes. Oh, there you go. Thank you so much. Thanks, Dave. All right, does anyone else need further time on this slide? Okay, awesome. So I want to just show you some pictures now to kind of back up those vocab words that you learned. So when you hear about someone's china cabinet, this is probably what you picture. Maybe your grandma has a china cabinet, or you've been to someone's house that has a china cabinet. It probably looks something like this, and it's full of something like the cup on the left. Those dainty little teacups or teapots or plates are probably made from porcelain, and so consequently they're called china because porcelain originally came from China. So so you might have interacted with porcelain and not even known it. This is an example of a press mold. This is something similar to what we're going to do for the project. We're going to make a slab of clay and then press it into a bowl to make it take on that curved shape. These are examples of closed forms. So forms that have a strong shoulder, a lot of shoulder area, and then a small little opening on the top. The reason we're doing closed forms with this project is when you do the horsehair, you can't really take your project and tip it on its side and do the horsehair and you know, and have it work really well. So what we want is to be able to set your project down and have a lot of surface area immediately visible to be able to drop the horsehair on it and have that horsehair really have a big canvas to show up upon. So that's why we're doing a closed form, to give you more room to have the cool effects of the horsehair. And then here's kind of what it looks like. There's a guy on the left that's placing the horsehair on a hot pot. It immediately sizzles and it smells pretty interesting as the horsehair burns. Like you'll smell it, but we'll be outside. It'll be fine. We'll be wearing masks. And there's a finished piece on the right. So it's a pretty unique process, and you can't achieve it any other way other than doing this process. Okay, so here are today's steps. You do not have to write this down. People at home, you don't have to write this down either, but as you're doing these steps, like I said, I'm gonna record this video, and you might wanna play the video and pause it on this slide as you're doing these steps, just to remember what to do first, second, third. So I'm gonna talk you through the steps, and then I'm gonna do the steps. I'm gonna demo it for you today. So first it says choose a press mold, which is a bowl that has a shape that you like, and you're gonna sketch a picture of the object that you're going to make from that mold. And here's a little hint, something that you're gonna have to take into account. One bowl by itself is not going to make a sphere. So the way you're gonna do this is you're gonna press clay inside your bowl, wait for it to get leather hard, pop it out, keep that wrapped up, and then you're gonna make a second bowl. So you're gonna end up having 2 press mold made bowls. You're gonna score and slip them together, and that's how you get your sphere. That's how you get your enclosed form. So if this is the bowl that I've chosen, my sketch might look something. If I look at the curve of this bowl, my sketch might look like that. If I put my 2 bowls together, I'm essentially gonna get maybe more of a elliptical sphere. And then I can decide if I wanna make it into a vase with a little small opening. I can decide if I wanna make it into maybe more of a jug that has a handle on it, or maybe I wanna put 2 handles on it. So your sketch is gonna be largely based on the type of bowl that you choose. And you're going to imagine them, what would it look like when you put them together? And then what other additions are you going to add to it to be able to make it have an opening and to make the form, you know, as interesting, or to make it into the shape that you want it to be. If you would like, let me try and draw this again upside down. So again, there's my sphere, my 2 bowls put together rim to rim. I could cut a larger, just cut an opening into it. So it's like that. You don't have to add anything else to it. So this could become a vase, or there's a certain kind of a vase called ikebana, where there's a little metal thing down at the bottom that has little spikes down there. And it's meant for like a single big fat flower to come out of it. And you can buy these little spiky things. So that's an option for you. So I just want you to brainstorm, what could you make this sphere into? What could it be? It's not the horsehair firing process is not going to make it food safe. So this can't be something you're going to eat or drink out of, because it's not glazed. It won't be safe to put any food in. So it's going to have to be something that's going to be more decorative. So once you've done your sketch, you're going to take your porcelain. People that are at home, you've been given enough porcelain for making your 2 bowls. So really, you're going to take your porcelain bag, and you're going to divide your clay in half. Half of the clay is going to make your first bowl. Half of your clay is going to make your second bowl. Okay, so you can't use all your clay to make the first bowl, because then you won't be able to make the second one and turn it into a sphere. So you're going to wedge that clay on the wedging table. Make sure that you clean it first. I've already cleaned the wedging tables that are here, but people who are at home, if there's little bits of raku stuck to your wedging cloth, sweep those off of there, or clean those off of there with a sponge, because remember, porcelain is really bright white. And so you'll see all those little gray speckles in it if you haven't cleaned your workspace very well. Then you're gonna take your plastic bowl, and I am going to actually do these steps in person here. Here we go. So I'm walking you through it as I'm talking about it. Okay, so I have my plastic bowl. Next, I'm gonna take a bag, because I can't just put my clay right in the plastic bowl. It would stick, and I wouldn't be able to pop it out. So I need a release, I need a barrier. So I'm gonna take my plastic bag, and I'm gonna put it down inside the bowl, like that. Then, I grab my porcelain, and I'm gonna take half. So I'm gonna wedge it a little bit. I'm gonna pre-flatten it a little bit. And then some of you who had distant learning ceramics earlier this year, remember that one way to make a slab is to throw the clay diagonally. So I'm gonna throw the clay diagonally, and I'm throwing it so that it hits kind of like this. It hits on one side and then stretches like that, and then it stretches in that direction. So if I always pick it up and have a different edge leading forward, it'll stretch my clay really evenly. And that's gonna be important as you're prepping your slab to put inside here. You want it to stretch evenly. You don't want it to be a long rectangle because then it won't fit very well. You want it to be more of a round circle. So if I always take a different edge, okay, now I'm gonna do this edge, have that leading forward. Now it's this edge leading forward. And if I continually do that, it should stretch fairly evenly. And I want it to be about a fourth of an inch thick. So then I'm going to take my bowl, I'm going to take my porcelain, and just very, very gently. It's not going to want to go in there really, really neatly and easily. It's going to want to fold in on itself. So keep this as close as possible. So I'm going to slowly and carefully try and nudge the clay down until it conforms to the curve of my bowl. So it's starting to fold here, and that's fine. But really, really slowly trying to nudge it down inside there. If you push too much in the very center, it's going to rip. And if it rips, that's okay. You can patch it with a little bit of clay and meld it in. But ideally, we would prefer it not to rip. All right, so now you see that? So it's all kind of really thick up here and uneven up here. The bottom is pretty good. The bottom is all kind of pressed now tight up against the wall of my pot. But this part up here, I have to work now on evening that out. So I'm going to use my fingers to kind of do some pinching. And luckily, I have the strength of the plastic bowl to help me. So I'm just going to bring some of that clay into the spots that are too thin or where there wasn't clay there. And then where the clay is too thick, I'm going to use my thumbs to slowly redistribute that clay and even it out. Or if there's a spot that ripped, you can take some of the clay from one of the areas that's too thick and patch it like a Band-Aid and fill in those areas that are too thin or that ripped on you. So the goal is to have a reasonably flat lip. So when you make your second bowl, you'll be able to connect them and they'll have a good connection point where they come together. But the goal is also to try and have the walls be relatively consistent. So that's what's going to take probably the longest today, is using your thumbs and blending that clay around until things have evened themselves out like that. Okay, so I still have more work to do here, but I'm just not going to take up your time like doing that right now. So now here's an important thing to note. Your assignment for today is to take a picture of this along with your drawing. So I can see that you did this, and I can see that you did some planning. Okay, so your one photo should look like what's in front of me right now. Then when you wrap this up, here's how I want you to wrap it up. This is going to be really easy because all you have to do is fold up the plastic bag. But because we want this clay inside here to get kind of leather hard for Monday so we can pop it out and make the second bowl on Monday, what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold the plastic bag over like this so it's covering the rim, because it's really important that the rim stays pliable so that I can score and slip it to my second bowl. But on the inside here, it's okay for a little air to get to that bottom part of the bowl. So I've just folded the plastic bag over enough so that the rim is covered, but the inside of the bowl gets a little bit of air. Okay, that's how you're wrapping it up, whether you're here or whether you're at home. That's how you're going to wrap it up for the weekend. And then we'll move on, and hopefully on Monday, it'll be ready to pop out and make our second bowl. So that is your process for today. People who are here in person, actually people who are at home, stay on the line for a little bit. I'm going to check in with you in a sec. People who are here, you can log out of the Google Meet right now. And while you're waiting for me to come back to you, because I have a few more things that I want to say to you guys, here are the press molds that are over here. And I have enough press molds where you could, if you wanted to, choose two. All right, so you wouldn't necessarily have to just use one and then make two bowls out of this. You could make one that looks like this, one that looks like this, and combine it. You can already kind of envision how that would look. So while I'm talking to the people who are still online, pick out your 1 or 2. Like if you want, you could do 2 of the same kind, but I actually have 2 bowls, so might as well just take the 2 bowls. So look through those, grab the 2 that you want, and start your sketching. All right, people who are at home, hang tight. I'm gonna check in with you guys now. Oh, I better unpin myself. All right, Brooke, Chloe, and oh, Dave's here already. So Brooke and Chloe, do you guys have any questions for me? Brooke or Chloe? Chloe, are you, oh, you're still in California, aren't you?
What did you say? Sorry.
Oh, just check in to see if you have any questions before you sign off for today.
No, I'm good.
Okay, great.